Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Tax, the go-to podcast for growth-minded CPAs and real estate professionals in tax. I'm your host, Tim LeMasters. Welcome back to those watching on YouTube and Spotify and to all other listeners.
Today, I'm joined by Alex Wilson, principal at Yeo Yeo. Alex works closely with clients on business advisory and tax planning and has seen firsthand how specialty tax can uncover new opportunities and strengthen client relationships. In this episode, we're diving into how specialty tax can become a powerful tool for emerging leaders looking to grow their book of business, especially within the clients they already have. Alex, so excited to have you on.
Excited to be here.
So, Alex, I obviously really appreciate you being here with us today, and I think it'd be really good for us to talk about some things that are important within CPA firms. And one of the things that I've found as I've gone throughout my tour of building relationships within CPA firms and connecting with folks, and I would even say some of the younger staff, starting at when they're a manager, then they move to a senior manager and then become partner. One of the things that I've noticed is helping emerging CPA leaders understand how specialty tax can become kind of a relationship building tool with clients. I know that's part of our title today, but one of the biggest challenges for emerging leaders inside CPA firms is fairly simple, I think. And then, looking at that is, how do you build your own book of business? What do you want to be when you're a manager? You come into a firm trying to, get your bearings and, how do we build relationships and connections and all those things? But beyond the relationship aspect, technical expertise is part of the equation. But everyone knows that uncovering new value for clients is what truly strengthens the foundation of, I would say, growth of relationships. And you've been really successful in doing this. I've been kind of alongside you now for years, and you've been successful at this. And I just ask you, what's kind of been your thought process on building your own book of business?
For me, it is kind of getting past the technical. A lot of clients, ideal clients for CPA firms, Yeo and Yeo included, it's a foregone conclusion that the technical work comes with the territory, if you will, and they're really looking for those value adds. What is the consulting, the advisory that you can apply to the relationship to further strengthen, add that value? And for me, kind of the turning point was fully understanding and being a better listener and just trying to hear for those targets, those triggers of, we're looking at expansion or new products or just kind of some buzzwords that 5 years ago I probably would have just jotted a note, not really done anything with. Now it's something that I really see as something we can attack, build on, bring in McGuire Sponsel. You guys have been a fantastic partner to work with, but it's just being a better listener overall has directly led to some of the successes that I've had. You just, instead of trying to dominate the conversation, steer it where you want to, ask these really broad, open-ended questions, allow the client management group to explain where they're coming from, where their vision is, and then identifying key gaps that, Yeo and Yeo can fill in. My team, whether it's on just kind of the more traditional accounting side, or if it's something that gets into more of the specialty tax, that's where, typically I'll reach out to you or another member of McGuire Sponsel to see, do we have something here?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think about it as always, the first thing in your mind is, how do I go find new business and, new prospects and opportunities within new prospects? But as you kind of think about this over your years with Yeo and Yeo and, in your accounting background, where's some of the key opportunities really coming from? Would you say it's prospecting? And this is just me kind of just probing and trying to get an understanding of this. Would you say it's prospecting? Would you say we have a really good client base already? I found a ton of opportunity in our client base, or is it a mixed bag? Kind of where do you see that usually?
For me, predominantly with my existing clients, and something that I talk with younger staff or even managers who are kind of taking that next step where they're really the in-charges of accounts, have a lot of client contact. Those clients already have an inherent trust in what we're doing. Now we have the process, we know who we're working with, we know what to expect when we go on site or when we go to get information for a tax return. Now let's take the data, study it, and see what is the value add. The idea of, hey, we're growing out of the building that we're in, new building. I mean, that could mean a number of different things. Or if they're in the manufacturing space, new product, prototyping, anything like that. For me, predominantly where I try to add the most value is with my current clients. And I already have that relationship. I can speak a little more candidly. I can have what I argue are real conversations. I've kind of already went through that honeymoon phase with them where we're trying to figure each other out. That being said, on the prospecting side for clients that I don't have a history with, sometimes I think that's a way that's an additional resource. I think that our firm, and I've been fortunate myself to through prospecting with newer clients, identifying things from day one, whether it's a cost segregation study or and it doesn't have to be something that leads to a win. It has to be something that, hey, I'm thinking about this and we should have a conversation about it. Let's go explore whether there's something here. Sometimes the numbers don't add up and it doesn't make sense, as we say, is the juice worth the squeeze? Other times, though, a really surprising number comes back and there's significant tax savings and, things that we can use to our advantage looking forward for cash flowing too.
Yeah, and let's talk about that for a second because a lot of times I go into some firms and they're like, well, we've not really utilized these types of services, or it's something we've dabbled in. Our biggest concern is we've not brought these up before, so we just leave them at bay and just not ruffle any feathers. But when you think about someone like you who takes a proactive approach to this, what happens if Alex Wilson knocks on their client's door and brings up cost segregation or R&D or international tax, LAS, location advisory services? I think that's the bigger concern.
Not to interrupt, if we're not bringing it up to our current clients, someone is, whether it's at a community event, whether it's targeted poaching, whatever it may be. I mean, I have, professional friends and contacts throughout where, just through conversation, maybe it's at a dinner, a kid's t-ball game, inevitably, right, you start talking shop and you bring up, hey, you work for a big manufacturer. Do you guys do R&D? Didn't you just move into a new facility? Have you guys looked at cost seg studies or anything like that? So it's never too late to bring it up. And it could have been something that it just may have not been the right time too, right? There's a time and a place to do a cost seg study. Oftentimes it's all the time, but there are certain situations where there's no immediate benefit from doing a cost seg, but you can do those years down the road and still get retroactive treatment. So again, we preach internally that there's no time like the present to talk about those opportunities and at least lay it out in front of the client, because they need to be armed with as much information as they can to make the best decision they think for their entity.
Yeah. And how do you separate yourselves within the industry? If you're going out and talking about certain things like, hey, we're cheaper, or, maybe we're not cheaper, but our service is a lot higher than others, or, we have this specialty tax team internally, or do some sort of, we're healthcare qualified and, it's something heavy we work on. Well, that's great, but how many other accounting firms within your space are doing those same things and having those same conversations? So how can you, from a prospect standpoint, how can you differentiate yourself? That's really the question. And even if it's not, let's not even say it's McGuire Sponsor, specialty tax services. What are the other things that you have, in your bag of tricks that you can say, hey, have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? And those are the areas where I think you do a very good job, is separating yourselves from your competitors in the market.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a lot of it just comes down to being intentional and being there for your client, making room for your client in terms of building out non-tax season touch points. I try to, whenever I have a new client, it seems like November through April is kind of when, you're touching most of their accounting information quite often through planning, through, that January 15th Q4, you're lining things up for scheduling to get all of the work done and then ultimately preparing a tax return or whatever the year-end deliverable is.
Mm-hmm.
For me, you got to have those conversations year round. And I've started to learn to say no a little bit more to clients that are just do my tax return. And, Yeo as well has tried to form more year-round continuous relationships with clients that are seeking, a back and forth relationship where in July, I don't want it to be anything. If the client has something come up, I want them to be able to email or call me and say, hey, we're thinking about buying the guy down the road. That down the road might be 300, 3,000 miles away. But again, I never want them to think that we're unavailable because it's tax season. The other thing that, we run into right now being busy season is a lot of people, it's a really busy time to be a CPA. We're pumping out taxes left and right. But you still have to be there for your clients because an opportunity could happen today in the M&A space or, hey, we're thinking about this. You can't say, yeah, let's talk in a month, when it slows down. You have to be present and kind of be able to balance, what tax season is, but also keep nurturing the relationship with your client. You can't turn it off March 17th or whatever. So
yeah, and I mean, heck, let's talk about some of the challenges. I mean, here's the reality is, and we've experienced a lot of exciting clients over the years that we've been working together. I've worked very closely with you on some pretty cool projects, but we know clients can be very active. Let's think LAS, for example. How we've run into some things where client reaches out to you and it's like D-Day right now. It's like, oh my gosh, I wish you'd have told me this earlier. And some of the things that I think we find as challenging is staying in front of these opportunities. A lot of our services and a lot of things that we do together can be retroactive, not an issue. But when you get into the location advisory services, obviously that's a very proactive practice. And I know we've talked about this it's funny, we've brought this up on podcasts before, talking about kind of what happens if a client makes an announcement during the kind of infancy stages of a project. And we lose that opportunity. So I agree with you, Alex, is, thinking about being proactive all the time and using these things as more of a sword and not a shield. The consultative mindset that you want to have within the CPA world is really the best approach to have. And I've watched you do it time and time again. Let's maybe dive into a couple things. I don't want to talk too much about, projects and opportunities, but let's dive into a couple ways that you've kind of been proactive, and within a client situation, you've been able to, because I know these are things, and I'm going to take a step back. I know these are things that, a lot of times you're in talking about tax planning and you're focused on your services and your products. How have you equipped yourself to make sure that you're always recognizing additional opportunity? I think that's an area where a lot of people struggle with. It's like, gosh, I have all these things to talk about. How am I supposed to identify these other things as well? What have you done to help yourself kind of get past that hurdle?
Honestly, one thing that's been hugely successful for me is not trying to do it myself. I put a lot of faith and trust in the team that I have at Yeo Yeo. I think actually on one of the first Let's Talk Tax podcasts, Dave said it best, and it was something that resonated with me. In today's day and age, a CPA cannot be a one-stop shop for an ideal client. We get so fixated on deliverables, whether it's a tax return, tax planning, financial statement. We've got massive tax changes with OB3, the state of Michigan, where we are at. We have a lot of decoupling for the first time in a really long time. So there's a lot of different nuances going there. So for me, I try to not be a master of everything. I fully understand and I'm comfortable not being a R&D Section 41, know all the ins and outs. But I pride myself on knowing enough information to know when something is there, and then to have spent the time forging the relationship with like McGuire Sponsel, or whether it's another third party, whoever it is that we need to bring in to kind of assist, get us to the finish line. Could also be someone else, at a different office within Yeo Yeo. But for me, it's able to get enough information to then turn around. A lot of times I go through you, Tim. We'll chat about what it is. We'll get it on a call, and we're able to go from there. So I think something that's been really successful for me is knowing enough to know when something is there and to escalate it to the next level just to see it. And that's something that I think the clients are really helpful for, because then I'm not trying to dance around credits and incentives or, international tax concerns. Those are not my strong suit. I certainly understand when they're there and kind of know where to move things. So something that's worked well for me is always knowing who the person to take an opportunity to is. More often than not, it's something that I can do, but when it goes into a specialty or a niche service, bring in the experts.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I look at it, trust is very important, obviously. And, I think with a relationship like this, there's three phases of trust. There's trust between you and your client. There's trust between you and me. And then there's trust now between me and your client. There's this whole, think about all the things that raise a lot of red flags for a CPA firms. Like, oh my gosh, I hold all the risk. I bear all the risk bringing someone into this relationship. And I think that's a barrier. I really do. I think it's a barrier with a lot of firms. And they're kind of like, you know what? I stay in my lane. I do what I do well. And I don't have to worry about anybody else messing up these relationships. So I completely understand that. And I've watched it. Think about when it started with McGuire Sponsor and Yeo Yeo over the years. We started, probably 6 years ago. And it was just kind of this back and forth conversation. And then obviously I got introduced to Dave Jewell, and Dave and I had a very in-depth conversation, and you could tell it's like, can I trust you? And then it's, let's sample a couple projects in here. Let's see how they do. And Zahir gives us the first project, cost seg, and I think all I got was cost segs from Zahir for a while. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, there's quality, there's service, the turnaround time's good. And I think that's what we had to connect all those dots early on for you all to think this is something we want to move forward with. And then it became this very strategic approach. We kind of dissected all the little ins and outs that everybody was comfortable with. And then when we got there, it was amazing to kind of see how things just start doing this. Because I think you guys were doing some of these services prior to us coming alongside you. And, it was one of those things where you had a couple that were doing some things that it was fine, and you knew you needed this service for your client. But we were able to connect in a way where it was like, hey, these are the areas that we see growth opportunity. This is our client base. Can you help us, and can we trust you? And it's been great ever since. So
yeah, I echo that. I think it was something where we were kind of tiptoeing around. Do we do a full plunge into this? We had some other service providers that we had aligned with, and once McGuire kind of was able to break through, and again, it was one of those things. Us being an organization of 9 offices. You start to hear kind of the ripple of, hey, we just did a cost seg. It was awesome. $280,000 of first year write-off, or, it was an R&D study, and it was a really quick turnaround. Client had a great experience. Those positive experiences kind of ripple throughout the firm. And then, as we kind of strengthened our relationship with, you guys coming on site, us getting to see you face to face, for me personally, getting to introduced to a couple clients that I have great respect for, and it was one of those things that the first time, right, it's a little guarded because my name's more so on the line, trying to bring in someone that I've never actually worked with. I've got coworkers who've had great experiences, and honestly, once we made it through that first R&D engagement, I think back in maybe 2020, maybe 21, hard to say. It's been full gas ever since. And just for us to know that if we think we have an opportunity, we can basically within, a couple of days at the most, have the conversation. We've had a conversation. I deal a lot in the ag space, and there's a lot of unknowns because, is agribusiness R&D? Well, you get down to the technical details of it. It's a little more difficult than a manufacturing client to qualify for the R&D. So sometimes you have to say, just because you're messing around with your input balance, it might not qualify. But at the same time, we've been able to kind of be persistent with certain clients who, I don't really want to do a cost seg. I don't know what that is. this and that, and then they kind of see the actual benefit of it, and the juice is worth the squeeze, or is there some foreign compliance that we should look at? Transfer pricing study. I think that was probably maybe the hot topic of like 2024 when they came out with some of the new guidance of, we're looking very closely at this. It's going to be very punitive if you're not in compliance. So it's almost kind of what's the flavor of the week where clients start getting a little bit more, scared's not the right word, but scared to not be compliant, and us having a resource and a solution for them, that a lot of them have worked with. Right now I've got client relationships that we've done 2, 3, 4 different services together for, and they see McGuire Sponsor as an extension of Yeo Yeo, which is exactly what I want them to see. Because honestly, if they have enough faith to almost reach directly out to you guys, in certain situations, I wouldn't feel, this slightest bit of nervousness if they did. So,
yeah, we've got a few that seem to just kind of run, right, and we've been able to kind of pick up where we need to, and obviously we're consistent in bringing you in the loop on all these things. But
yeah,
we value the trust that you've placed in us for sure. So, shifting gears a little bit here, and I know we're running low on time, but just shifting gears, when you look inside Yeo and Yeo and you think about, okay, how do we identify the next group of leaders, the next group of people who are going to drive the firm to its next phase? When you think about that, are these some of the things that are in consideration? Is how do they identify opportunity within our client base? How are they prospecting? What are the conversations they're having? Are they trying to be, very technical? Are they more relational? Are those some of the things you all are considering, or is there different routes you take with that?
Yeah, technical is obviously always going to be, a big consideration. We want to be able to make sure you do your job. But for me, my high performers take care of their clients, whether that's simply being, as timely as possible, answering an email. Even if the response is, hey, Tim, I got your email. I'm swamped the next couple of days. I'm going to get back to you by the end of the week. Let me know if that works. If not, I'll kick in a teammate. Or are they taking time when a return is complete or nearing completion to kind of have that final conversation of, we don't have to take full depreciation here. If we throttle down, maybe you max out this tax bracket, or before I do take every depreciation, number I can, or whatever it may be, are they thinking a little bit outside the box, that one step past compliance to say, yeah, the return's done, but is it done correctly to suit their needs? Do we need a whole bunch of cash flow available, meaning we don't want to pay a bunch of tax? Well, let's take a little bit more depreciation because we're going to have, CapEx spend in next year. There's so many different things. So as long, the way that I look at the high performers, are they doing an adequate job of delivering 5-star client service and, putting their clients' needs ahead of their own, especially during this time of year? I mean, even that 5-minute phone call just to go over a return with a shareholder or whoever it may be, that's massive long term. That's a lot of trust because our clients know we're working a lot right now.
I'd agree. So I appreciate your insight. I guess, based on our discussion today, any closing thoughts or anything else that you think we need to discuss prior to getting off?
No, I think, for me, and I think I speak very openly for, the rest of, my coworkers at Yeo and Yeo, we've been extremely pleased, and your guys' availability and even guidance. I mean, with everything that goes on with these tax laws, I mean, everybody goes into scramble mode. OB3 comes out. What does this mean for here? And then, in Michigan, we had the R&D credit, reenacted for the first time in 15 or so years, and you guys are all over it. So again, going back to what Dave said, it's comforting to know that we don't have to be the expert in everything. We just have to know the expert. And in this case, it's nice to be able to lean on you guys and bring you in and kind of help shoulder the burden of, nurturing that relationship with the client. So we're extremely grateful for that.
Well, I really appreciate that, Alex. And obviously that's, that goes both ways. We value the relationship between our firms and obviously look forward to future success together with you guys. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.